Hi everyone. I didn't really plan to do a presentation, but then I ended up doing one anyway. So I have a few slides and then I have some code to show you because I'm pretty sure that's more interesting. So the problem I'm going to talk about today is interacting with OCI registries in a Dagger pipeline. And I started to work on this problem when I was working on a Helm module. I was building a Helm module for Dagger. We are publishing Helm charts to GitHub's container registry at OpenMeter using Dagger. And I noticed that the credentials used by either Helm, or this is pretty much true for every other tool interacted with OCI registries out there, even Docker login. I know there is some OS keychain support in Docker for a while now, but when you run like stuff in a container, these tools generally write the credentials to the file system. And that's generally a very bad idea in Dagger because whenever you write something to the file system that ends up in the cache and someone with access to that cache or the file system can basically reverse engineer or get access to the credentials and use them. And obviously the exposure depends on how you run Dagger, but it's still there. Credentials are being stored in plaintext. They're not even encrypted. So that's definitely a problem. And I wanted to find an alternative way to use these tools, but also authenticate with registries. And generally, these tools work the same way. They all basically just copied what Docker did a couple of years back. They have like a registry login command. They may or may not contact the registry immediately. It's really not set in stone whether they do or not. They can, but it's not really a formal specification of how this whole thing works. And then you have to give it a username and a password. Sometimes it's called a secret because some registries allow you to use tokens, not just passwords. Basically, they are passwords. And then they are stored in a config file. And whenever the tool needs to interact with the registry, it's basically sending the same credentials to the registry as basic auth or something like that. So it actually needs the credentials over and over again when interacting with the registry. And how this looks like in Dagger, if you're trying to build something, or I'm going to use Helm as an example because that's the original tool that I developed this whole thing for. So if you are working on a Helm chart, publishing a Helm chart to a registry, you probably need something like this. You need a password, and even if you use like Dagger's secret primitive, and you inject that as a variable into the container, when you run Helm registry login, it's still going to store the credential in plain text on the file system. How that file looks like, in case of Helm, it's in their Helm home. It's basically a JSON file, the registry name, and then a base 64 encoded version of the username and a password. Again, locally, most of the time you can use credential helpers. That's not really an option in a container or in Dagger. So, okay, so these tools write these configuration files. Maybe we can create that file and then mount that file into the container so that we don't actually have to save the file within the container on the file system. And turns out that actually works quite well. One caveat, of course, is that you can't use the login commands of those tools anymore, but that's really a small price to pay. So what you can do here is that is you can create a secret manually. Again, the config file itself is fairly simple, so you can easily create it yourself if you want to. By the way, if you use Helm or Kubernetes, you're probably already doing it because this is how the image pool secret looks like as well. So if you are pulling from a private registry, you are already doing this somewhere. So you can create this file and then mount this secret as a file into the container. It's not going to get written to the file system and it's safe. You're not going to have credentials in plain text on the file system. All right, so maybe we can take that one step further and maybe we can build a module for it. So we don't actually have to create that whole JSON file ourselves. Maybe we can use a module for that. And it turns out, of course, we can. So I've created a module called registry config. And it basically gives you a nice Dagger native API for creating this configuration. It's also fairly similar to how you would do the same thing with publishing containers. So if you publish containers using Dagger, this is basically the same API. You have a function called with registry auth, you provide the credentials, and then you do whatever you need to do to publish the container or other artifacts. So you can mount that secret in the container, and instead of using Helm registry login, in this case, you can just use Helm push and push the chart to the registry. And maybe we can do something else. Like if you take a look at here, I actually have to mount the secret manually. Maybe I can write a function that allows me to, like, if you're writing a lot of Dagger code, you probably have like a container and then a lot of with exec or with environment variable style function calls. And I kind of like this builder pattern. And if you do something like this, you need to have like a config separately here and then call with mounted secret. Now, obviously, it's not completely inline in this case, but you can actually completely inline it if you have a function that takes a container and returns a container. So this is what I did with the registry module. On the config, there is actually a secret mount function that returns a secret mount struct that has a mount function that takes a container and returns a container. So you can shove this whole thing into the containers with call. And it's basically going to modify the container and mount the secret internally. So if you want to like write a single container and use this whole builder pattern thing, you can absolutely do that. I kind of like this style and that you can do this. All right, let's take a look at some code. And what I'm going to do, I actually haven't tried this, so hopefully it's going to work. Is it large enough?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay, cool. So here is the pro tip for you if you are a Nix user. If you need a Dagger binary quickly in your shell, you can just run this small script and alias the Dagger binary to this Nix run command, which is going to download the latest Dagger from the Nix Dagger repository. So that's what I'm gonna do, because otherwise, like, I don't have Dagger locally, so I have to alias it, and now I can create a new module, and I'm gonna use the Go SDK because I always use Go.
Don't try this at home, kids.
And I'm also going to need the registry config module, so I'm gonna install it. It's gonna grab the latest version from Daggerverse. I should see it here, right? So what I'm going to do here is basically create a very simple Helm module. Actually, I'm not even going to create the module itself. I'm just going to show you how it would work if you were to build a Helm module. And again, you can use this module for basically anything else. Like if you want to build a module for some other OCI tool, you can use that. And I'm gonna show you how. So let's actually start with the terminal here. And I'm going to use the official Helm image. So Dagger call run, it's gonna start a terminal, and I have Helm here. Okay, so let's say I create a new demo chart. I'm gonna package it. So now I have the demo package, and I'm trying to push this to, let's say, GitHub. So Helm push demo OCI. Let's say to my personal account, Hunters. Now, if I do this, it's obviously not going to work because I haven't authenticated, and I don't really have a token in this context. I could just do this, but I want to use like a secret, and I want to do this in a safe way. So what I'm going to do, by the way, sometimes I don't know why, but the terminal exits and just outputs some gibberish. This is an official bug report then. So let's create a new configuration. Dag registry config with registry oath IO, my name, and then I'm going to need a token. Say GitHub token. It's going to be a secret because it's a secret. Okay. Okay, so I have a config. And I want to mount it in the container. Now I could just grab the secret and use the with mounted secret, but I kind of like using this pattern where you can just config secret mount dot mount, and I'm gonna need a path here, which is I guess root dot config helm registry config the JSON. Okay, that's how this works. So I'm going to do the exact same thing, except now I'm going to have the registry config in my container, so I should be able to push this to GitHub Container Registry. Now I'm going to need a GitHub token, and I can just do this. So I'm going to use the GitHub CLI that I have locally to grab a token and mount it as a secret in the module call, and then I'm going to use that to create a config. Okay, so first let's check that I actually have the configuration. Helm registry. Okay, so I have a config. I'm not going to open it because that would give my credentials away. So now I can create a demo, package it again, and then I can try to, by the way, I don't have a demo module yet, hopefully. Let's see. No, I don't. So this is going to be genuinely me pushing to GitHub Container Registry. So Helm push demo OCI and fingers crossed this is going to work. Okay, it worked. So now I should have, yeah, a demo hand chart here, which I'm going to delete immediately for good hygiene because I don't need this. So this is how you can use the registry config module to create a configuration and safely use it in a Dagger container. Now, let me show you how am I doing on time? Do I still have time?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So let's take a look at the Helm module I'm using it in, because I think it's interesting. So, oops. So when you're building another module, you probably want to like hide this whole registry config thing. And you like, as far as I know, you can't actually use like external types, like return external types. So you kind of have to like embed this module if you are building a reusable module. And this is my Helm module. So when I'm working with Helm, probably don't want to interact with the registry config module directly. I want to hide it. And that's what I do. So I have the registry config as a field here. It's a private field, so you can't access it. And then I have a constructor that initializes it in my module. And then I have a couple helper functions here that basically expose the functionality of the underlying module. So I have the same with registry and without registry auth functions that you can call. Again, it's the exact same API as in the container API. So it's familiar, you can use the same thing. And then I basically use it like this. So again, the same with function pattern here. And then I just mount the configuration in the container. And whenever I push something, let's see, do I push or publish somewhere here? Yeah. So then there is this push function, and you can't really see anything about registry authentication here. It's just pushing the registry config is already there. Obviously, if you don't provide the credentials, it's gonna fail. But this is how you embed. How do I go back? This is how you embed the registry config module into like another reusable module. If you wanted to build like, I don't know, an ORAS or something like that module, you can reuse this registry config module. It's on Daggerverse.
And Mark, while you're pulling that up, we actually
Registry
heard
config.
from Solomon.
Okay. Question in general?
Yeah. I was wondering if it was a reasonable feature request to add magical support for the different proprietary authentication methods of the different registries. You know, Google Cloud, you have to call the G Cloud, auth helper, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I guess I would probably implement that as a higher level module, because in those cases you have to provide different credentials, like the standard, not so formalized APIs that you need a username and a password. And
Yeah.
in case of those registries, you need to obtain those from different kinds of credentials. So I would probably implement this as a higher level module, but yeah, it would totally make sense.
I would be interested to see how you resolve that, because that's what you just said. That's exactly the API design problem that I ran into. I wasn't sure what the most elegant way was to resolve it, so I just dropped it and kind of do it
I see.
on a one-off
So
way. But now we have
yeah,
interfaces, so I wonder if interfaces
yeah.
could be used in some way, you know?
Yeah, I was thinking about using interfaces in a few modules. Like, for example, I was thinking about creating a generic secret provider module that you
Right.
can just plug other secret providers into, and basically just have an interface with a simple interface where you can switch providers. Something like that. I guess that would work, because, but like even with those other registries, they are returning a username and a password, because that's how all registries work.
Yeah.
So I guess that could work. So it's on Daggerverse. Documentation is here. The explanation of why you need this is here. I think there was an issue on the Dagger issue tracker with some discussion. So if you want some details about that, you can check that out. And a couple more details, like today, like OCI registry authentication is not really formalized. Everyone is doing the same thing, which is like the Docker registry standard was written down in Markdown, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and like everyone is doing the same thing, but it's not really a formal specification. So there is now an authentication work group trying to formalize OCI registry authentication. I don't really see like a formal specification happening anytime soon, because it's a broad range of issues that they need to solve, but this is coming. So hopefully we will have something better. And a couple of links, like if you'd like to hear more about how registries work, I did a full talk on the container registry authentication spec and how it works at Open Source Summit last year. So you can check that out. I have some slides and up as well. And I actually did a blog post about this topic with a bit more details on our blog. So if you want to check those out.